cool. So, just one little disclaimer, just like excuse the dog. It's garbage collection day here, so there are constantly people in the streets. So he's going to be barking at them. So just apologies on that. But okay, cool. So as Mornay mentioned, my name is Chantal. Today I kind of want to touch on a subject that's a kind of near to my heart, and it's UX and human-centered design in industry, and it's called It's Complicated. So what I want to touch on is the different context in which you as a UX designer will be working in industry, because there are multiple different contexts, and I'll also be going through the different aspects that kind of influence the context, and kind of then give a few examples on how I kind of had to adapt what I know in order to kind of make it work, so that I can actually do UX and be a bit more human-centered while working on industry projects. So I kind of already covered this just now, but I'm just going to be telling you a bit more about myself in this presentation. I'm going to be speaking about what UX is like in industry and the different aspects that kind of influence it and the different working contexts. And up until that point, it might look a bit gloom. So I'm going to be adding a bit of a pick-me-up, and then I'm going to be going through some industry examples of projects that I've been a part of. So first off, about me, I am currently an intermediate UX UI designer at RetroRabbit. RetroRabbit is a software development and design consultancy. And I've been working for them for about 2 years and 7 months now, and that's also the amount of industry experience that I have. I work as a consultant, and basically what that means is that RetroRabbit, they get clients, and then their client tells them, listen, we need a UX UI designer, and then RetroRabbit provides them with a UX UI designer, which is me. And that can kind of vary, like the length of the projects vary. So it could be a once-off project that runs for like 3 months. It could be on a 6-month basis. It could be a yearly basis. But basically, there's a contract between RetroRabbit and that company. And when that contract expires, there's a conversation on whether to keep me on there or if I should be taken off, and then I would go to another client. So it basically means that you get exposed to a bunch of different types of projects, and you kind of have to in a very quick manner be able to adapt to any context and be able to learn what you need to do, etc. So it's quite an interesting thing to be as a consultant. And as Mornay mentioned, I used to be an open window student. So 3 years ago, I was sitting exactly where you are now. Maybe not exactly where you are, because we were still going into class back then. And then also last year, I was also a student. I was completing my honors at Open Window last year. And then, as you can hear with all of the dogs barking, I love cats and dogs and all animals, really. I just also want to just add a bit of a disclaimer that please keep in mind that the stuff that I'm going to be telling you and the things that's presented in this presentation is from my own perspective working as a UX UI consultant. There are obviously multiple other roles that you can go into like in the industry. So this is just me as a UX UI consultant sharing a bit of my learnings. And then my biggest passion is research, human-centered design, and inclusive design. While I was still studying, for me, research was like a big thing. It was something I was really, really good at. And it was something I really enjoyed, to take research and turn that into insight. Also identifying problems and empathizing with the users and their problems, and kind of basing all of my decisions not on something that I think would work, but something that I have some research to back that up. And what I thought was what was going to happen is I'm going to enter industry and I'm going to be able to use that that kind of talent, or whatever you want to call it. I'm going to be able to apply that to to my work, and that's going to be the thing that's going to make me stand out. So the reason I want to speak about this topic is because that wasn't really true, and that wasn't really what happened. So I really want to share with you the lessons around UX in industry that I wish someone would have told me while I was sitting where you are sitting, because it did cause a lot of hardship for me, especially in the beginning of my career. So these different lessons that I had to learn kind of made it a bit better for me, which is why I want to share this with you guys. So UX in industry. So when you're in industry, as a UX designer, there are a lot of different aspects that you kind of need to consider, and these are like the main three ones. So it's basically technology, the user's needs, and business requirements. And when I talk about contexts and working in different types of contexts, this is like the perfect scenario where all three of these things weigh the exact same. So you consider your user's needs, you consider the technology, or the technology is more like what's possible to develop in the time frame that you have. And then also business requirements are what the business, the people who either hired you or people who hired Retro Rabbit, they are the people who kind of pay for your work. So that's basically the business. But if we talk about different contexts and the different contexts that you work in, these three things will weigh differently. And unfortunately, usually what happens is that user needs start weighing less and less and less. And sometimes it's not even considered at all. And kind of all that's really considered is business requirements, which is something I'll go into in a lot more detail later. But the business requirements and technology, it's also refers to the different resources that you have available to you as a UX designer, which is also something I'll expand on a bit later. But just keep in mind that these are the main three things that would influence you as a UX designer and the context in which you work. So the term UX maturity is something that I only learned very recently. And it's kind of like when I learned, or when I found out about the term and kind of learned what it is, everything started to make sense to me, all of the hardships that I experienced. So what you kind of need to understand that UX maturity in South Africa is overall not very mature. And that this does not refer to UX demand at all. I mean, if you look at LinkedIn, like the hashtag UX designer, it's been one of the biggest thing that's been in demand over the past 5 years. Like everyone wants a UX designer. But basically what this refers to is actually what people who hire UX designers think that UX designers do. So recently we had a talk at Retro Rabbit with Verima Henry, who is kind of big on facilitation in UX. He came to speak to us about exactly this topic, and he had this quote, which is a really great quote that kind of explains it, and it's that design is a commodity, but problem solving is an art. So things that UX designers will get hired for, it's design, it's UI, basically UI design, and that's the commodity. That's the thing they think they are appointing you for. But kind of the things that UX designers actually do by problem solving, doing research, identifying problems, all of those different things, it's not something that the clients or the business really know that that's what you're actually hired to do. And design is kind of the thing you do afterwards. So a lot of the times you will sit in a situation where you think that I'm not really doing what my expertise are. And as I previously said, my expertise coming out of university were research, it was human-centered design, all of those different things, but that's not actually what you're getting hired to do. And when I say design, it's basically what a lot of people like to refer to putting lipstick on the product. It's making things look pretty. And unfortunately, currently, currently that's kind of the perception, that people who hire UX designers think that's all we're good for, in a sense. And UX maturity is actually it's the biggest thing that influences the context in which you work. So different contexts, so different working environments that you go to work in has different UX maturities inside of them, which is why I want to cover this topic, because that's something that's going to influence you a lot. So touching on that, so looking at human-centered design in industry, and the reason why I say it's complicated is because a lot of the times from business perspective, this little picture like is a perfect representation. It says, but Susan, why would we spend time and money talking and researching our customers? We already know who our customers are. We've been doing this for 25 years. So a lot of the times, as a UX designer, you will be given the problem and sometimes even the solution already, and you're basically only expected to kind of create a flow or create the UI of a flow or whatever that might mean. But those problems and stuff that's given to you is a lot of the times it comes from business requirements. It's a lot of the times it doesn't even come from real users. Which is why I say that being human-centered in industry, it's kind of complicated. And I will be touching on, when I get to the part where it's a bit of more of a pick-me-up, on what that kind of means for a UX designer and what we kind of need to do in order to rectify this view. So the last thing that's kind of gonna influence your working environment is the actual working style that you will work in. So the majority of working style is called Agile, and it's basically a philosophy of delivering value to customers quickly. So that's where kind of Agile originated from, and it's kind of turned into, I don't know, a bit of a really hard working environment to work in, because it basically means that you're working in sprints. And a sprint kind of refers to your delivery times. So I worked in situations where we had a sprint of just a week. So you're basically given a bunch of tasks that you need to complete in a week. Or currently I'm working in 2-week sprints where you have 2 weeks to complete a subset of work. And this is a big influence on what you can actually do in terms of UX and human-centered design, because as we all know that human-centered design and UX sometimes feels to outsiders that it takes up a lot of time, because you kind of need to not just accept the problems that's given to you, you kind of need to go back, you kind of need to figure out whether that is the real problem, what are the sub-problems, it's kind of stepping backwards before you can go forwards. And in an agile environment, it's all about quickly moving forwards. So which is why UX can be quite a difficult thing to get done in industry. But one thing that Agile kind of leans to, and it's kind of this big philosophy of software, is we work fast and break things, which, yes, it's good to make mistakes sooner rather than later, but a lot of the times you'll find that when something doesn't work as well as it should, it's kind of brushed off and say, yeah, but we're going to fix it later anyway. We can give our users this one thing now because we're going to fix it later, which is also not a great way to work. And as I mentioned, UX is still trying to find a way to fit into this style of work. And I'll be getting to a lot of different alternative UX practices and methodologies that kind of developed out of this. So touching then on the different working contexts, now that you kind of have an idea of the different elements that influences the context in which you work. So another thing that influences the context is what type of client you have. So this can range from startups who are usually very small. So a startup is literally someone had an idea and now they want Retro Rabbits people to kind of develop and design it for them. So it's usually people who are very small. They don't have a lot of resources. They maybe have investors, and those investors gave them a subset of money, and that's all they have to work with. So startups are kind of the most difficult to work for, because you don't have a lot of time, you don't have a lot of resources, and you kind of need to work very, very fast. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you have big corporates. So these are, let's say, your banks. So working as UX designers, especially consultants, you're going to find yourself working in what we call fintechs, which are your big corporates, it's your banks, it's your insurance companies. So they are really, really, really large organizations who have a lot of different subsets of little tiny things going on inside of there. And that's where you will have big business requirements. Yeah, that's that. And then you have your stuff in between. Sometimes we'll work on proof of concepts, which is someone thinks something is a good idea, so we create a quick mock-up of that idea just to see if it works, and we can kind of take it from there and do research based off of that. Yeah. So, but I'm just gonna look at corporate versus startup, because that's kind of the two ends of the spectrum. So basically what you're looking at is resources, time, and budget. So for a startup, everything is limited. You have, and I'll go into a lot more detail on what I mean with resources. So with resources, it's kind of, do you have access to your user base? Do you have access to different technologies or things like that you can use for things like user testing? So for example, while I was working for the startup, we didn't really have a lot of access to our user base. We didn't really have the money to invest into a lot of fancy user testing software. So what we had to do is what we call guerrilla testing. So it's basically you run up to someone and you ask them to test your thing and give you some feedback. That's basically what I mean by resources. And then with corporate, for example, so I'm currently on a project for a big corporate company. And for example, if we want to do user testing, they literally have a recruiter, and you just say, listen, I want to do user testing. I'm looking at these types of people, like in this age range, etc., etc. And you have a recruiter who go out and they actually recruit users for you in order to test. And then you also have all of these fancy eye tracking software and all of these fancy things to kind of see what users are looking at in what order, drop-off rates, all of that. So that's kind of what I mean with resources. It's what you have available to you. And then time, it refers to your, so in an agile environment, to your sprints. So while I was working for a startup, we only worked in weekly sprints, which was really, really hard because we had a lot of work to get through in 1 week. And sometimes we would work on multiple different features, new and existing, which made it really, really hard to actually incorporate proper UX practice. Because when you only have a week to basically design 3 features, you kind of need to jump into UI design immediately, and you don't really have a lot of time for testing, which is really not ideal. And that's one of the examples I'm going to be speaking to you about later on, how I kind of made that work. Then time in corporates, you will find you don't have a lot, but there's also way too much. So what I mean with that is, with the work that we have to do, we don't have a lot of time to complete it by. But whenever we want to put in a request for, let's say, a research initiative or whatever, we always have to make a proposal and then present that to business. And then sometimes it can even take months before something like that gets approved. And then by that time, it's kind of too late. So in a corporate, you'll find things that has to do with managerial or business or whatever. It takes a long, long time for anything to get approved. And by the time it actually does get approved, it's almost too late. So that's the biggest struggle time-wise. If you don't have a lot of time to do your actual work, but if you want to request something that will help you do your work better, it takes way too long to get approved. And then budget. So budget is basically for any initiative, like a research initiative, for a user testing initiative, all of those things, it adds up to money because it depends on the resources you need as well as the time you need. You always have to remember that in this industry, time also equals money because you're paid either by the hour as a consultant or by the day. So time always equates to money. So which is why anything you want to do, you need to be able to do it as quickly as possible, which is why we kind of need to adapt our UX tools, our UX practices, all of that in order to do it in the fastest time possible so that it can actually get approved. But I'll get to that a bit later. So all of these things are basically what's going to influence what is possible for you to do in any specific working context. It's not just about, you as a UX designer, you are the expert, you know what you're talking about. Obviously, you need to do research. Obviously, you need to speak to your users. It's not that simple. There are so many things that kind of influence what is possible for you to do. And this gets me to my next point, is that all of these things, it doesn't matter if you don't have buy-in. So this kind of little meme thing I found, it's the best way to explain it. So step one for a UX designer is to plan discovery, user research, strategy. We want feedback, we want testing phases, and then presenting that to business, just to realize that you don't have time, budget, or buy-in for any of the above. And then you kind of go through the process of just UI design, and then lastly, you sit in a meeting and listen to stakeholders complain that no one is buying their product or clicking the button. And this you'll actually find a lot. You, as a UX designer, you tell them, in order to be successful, we need to do all of these things in order to really understand the users, to be able to really understand what the problems are that we're solving, because the problems that's just given to us may not even be the problem. And then all of that kind of gets, it doesn't get approved. And then at the end, they wonder why things are not working. Which is why I say that UX practice, it's kind of complicated. And the things that I really struggled with was just having to, always just start with UI and then not even be able to test it. And then at the end, what you created isn't actually useful to people using it, and you get really bad feedback, and you kind of then also get blamed for that because you are the UX designer. You should be able to do your job, but in order to do your job, you need to go through a few steps and not take shortcuts. So this is kind of the pick-me-up. So all of these things, it might sound a bit intimidating or bad, but it's actually pretty exciting, because what that means is you're going to be entering a very new kind of field, if I can state it that way, because as you know, UX is quite a young field. It's not that developed yet, which is kind of what the maturity is referring to. So you are basically going to have the power to kind of shape UX and kind of shape the future of UX. And I don't know about you, but I find that really, really exciting, because it's kind of being able to shape an entirely new movement, if you want to think about it like that. And I am pretty optimistic about the future of UX. And we as UX designers, we kind of need to bring about the change that we want to see. And it all starts with just planting seeds. So you need to kind of educate people. You need to educate your client. You need to educate the business on what UX is and what the benefits are of UX. And that means kind of finding ways in which you can do that. So when you're sitting in a meeting full of business people and business analysts and they talk about, you know, we want to do this thing, and you kind of need to then start already being a part of that conversation and not just sit idly and quietly and just wait for them to tell you what to do, but actually start asking questions and start asking the right questions. So why and for who is going to be your best friends? And that's something I really wish someone would tell me early on in my career, is not just accepting, but actually asking them, okay, cool, but why do we need to do this? For who would we need to do this? What is the problem that we want to solve? Because when you ask these questions, they kind of start thinking and they kind of start realizing that what they're asking for comes from them and not really from the user. And how do you actually then know it's going to be successful? They actually start realizing their own assumptions and biases if you just start asking the right questions. So that, because the hard thing is they are basically, as a consultant, they are your client. So you have to be very diplomatic in the way in which you do these things. You can't just insult them. You have to just be very strategic in the things you ask, so that they can start realizing by themselves that maybe we should do some research. Maybe we should make sure that this is something that people actually want before we go and spend a bunch of money creating it. We kind of need to, we as UX designers, we need to advocate for human-centered design, and we need to be the voice of our users and kind of fight for them, because a lot of the times we are the only ones who are going to be thinking about our users. And it's a really weird thing to consider, because you would think large companies or even startups, like, they want to solve a problem for someone. But unfortunately, what you have to remember along the lines is that the person you report to, they also have a boss. And that boss also has a boss. And all of them also have their own stresses, they have their own deadlines, they have their own things that they need to deliver, which is why they kind of push you to just do the thing that's asked of you. But you kind of need to understand and plant these different seeds that there is a better way to do things. But it also means that you as a UX designer will need to adapt your UX processes and methodologies, because a lot of the like theoretical things that we know, like the ideal UX process, all of that, it does take a lot of time. And you have to remember that, unfortunately, in certain circumstances and situations, there's no funding, there's nothing really that they can even do to give you a lot of time to do these things. So you really need to think about how you can adapt your process, how you can adapt your methodologies. And that kind of makes your job a lot more exciting, because it means that every single project you land on, it's not going to be the same. Like, it's not just problem solving in terms of problem solving for your users, but actually problem solving your own process in order to see how you can adapt that process to fit this particular context that you're working in, which is also quite an exciting thing to do if you think about it. And a lot of the times you're going to find that you need to create your own opportunities for UX, for user research, because a lot of the times it's not going to be given to you. A client won't come to you and say, okay, cool, Chantal, I want you to make this particular product, but please, can you go through research? Can you go and speak to users? Can you do all of these things? A a lot of the times that's not going to be what's asked of you. You're going to have to create your own opportunities to do that. And we are, as UX designers, we're making a lot of progress in this respect in bringing about change. So the current project that I am on, a few years ago, they, like UX and design in this particular, for this particular company, it was kind of non-existent. But the woman who was appointed to be kind of the head or the lead of UX or the design practice, she really started fighting for all of these things, making them see what the benefits are, just asking for like a small, like little taste just to show them. And where we're sitting now is in a space where we can have a lot more of these conversations on research and tasting and all of that. So that, like, they slowly but surely, we are making headway in this respect. So some examples of on how I kind of created my own opportunities for human-centered design in UX, as well as how I kind of adapted some of the processes. So before I get to that, there are a lot of UX processes and methodologies that is currently out there to kind of, it was adapted to be fast-paced and iterative. So instead of a one-size-fits-all process that could be quite long and tedious, these different processes and methodologies kind of adapted what we know is existing, but in a way to test and validate your assumptions really quickly, to be able to problem solve really quickly, and to come up with multiple solutions as a team. Sorry. And some of these things are, so these green things at the bottom, they are linked. So when I share this with you guys, you will be able to click on it if you are interested in going and read up on it. But basically, some of the biggest ones, it's one of them is Lean UX. So Lean UX is all about validating and testing your assumptions really quickly before you just jump in and create the design. So it's kind of creating a framework for you to be able to also collaborate, not just with your design team, but with the business stakeholders and all of those people, so that we can actually see if our assumptions are true or not and what we still don't know. Then we have design or Google sprints. So I kind of explained what sprints are in the beginning, so agile sprints. So this was designed or created to kind of fit into that agile environment. And this is usually 5 days or 7 days, where you go through a process of using research in order to come up with quick solutions, and or first identifying your problems, coming up with quick solutions, creating quick prototypes, and then testing. And then so that by the time you actually start on the solution, you already know that that the problems that you're solving is actually the real problem that you're solving, and the kind of solutions that you're thinking about is something that would actually work. So that's what design or Google sprints are designed to do. Then you have other things like design dashes, lightning decision jams. They are basically really, really quick. It's like an hour, 2 hours, where you just come together, you collaborate with your team, with your stakeholders, and you have just sessions on what are the problems, are there actual problems, what are possible solutions. And then you also have like kits and stuff that you can find. So one of them is Design a Better Business, which is like a few like different exercises or whatever you can go through. I'm pretty sure you guys know about the IDEOs, like kits and things that they have, which are little cards and exercises and stuff you can do. And then also design thinking, which is also just an iterative process of seeing what the problem is, creating product or creating solutions, prototypes, testing, and just going in a loop. So all of these different things were just, it's just UX methodologies that we already know, just adapted so that it can be done in a very quick manner. So one of the case studies that I was a part of, so I kind of had to create an opportunity for user testing. So this was when I was working for the startup. And when I started working with the startup, the specific app that we were working on, it was already in production for about 2 years. And in that time, about no user testing was ever done because there just weren't any time or budget or buy-in for it. And then we kind of developed a new feature for it, which required us to onboard the Retro Rabbit company onto this app, and then also asking them to complete their profile. So instead of just doing what we were told and just onboarding people, we as the designers, we treated this as a user testing opportunity. So while we were onboarding people, we were asking them, we were observing them, we were asking them what they found hard, if they, so basically we basically treated this as a user testing opportunity instead of just doing what we were asked, which was onboarding people. And actually what this whole thing resulted in was a complete redesign of the app, because so many, like 2 years worth of usability problems was identified through doing this. And we were able to present that back to the client and telling him, listen, people are having these different problems and multiple people were having the same problems. And he actually really liked this type of feedback, even though they never gave us buy-in to do that previously. Once we did it, they actually saw the merit in it. And it resulted in a complete redesign of the app, which made it a lot better. And that redesign, we made a lot more progress in just 6 months than we did in 2 years. So after that, whenever we asked for some time for user testing, it was always a yes, because they saw the real value in doing that. So it's all about creating those different opportunities to showcase what testing and what user feedback can actually do for you. And after that, it will become easier to get buy-in for doing those types of things. Then another initiative was we created data-driven personas using machine learning. So this was also for the startup, and we were looking at expanding from just an app to a desktop like web version, but also like expanding it. But the problem we were facing was people were saying, even though people were able to use the app now, like it was usable and user-friendly, people still didn't really know what value they could derive or what that app can actually do for them. So we wanted this desktop version to be to actually solve real problems. But we told the client, listen, we don't really know our users. We like literally, we've never done any type of research on the users, the problems they're facing. So we suggested that what we should do is kind of some qualitative and quantitative research in order to get to know our users and what their problems are, and then create personas from that so that we can house all of our research that we gathered, as well as represent our users, so that when we make decisions, we actually base it off of our real users and not just our assumptions. But the main problem, once again, was time, because one of the most time-consuming things is actually taking your research and the data that you collected and sorting through that. That is the thing that's really tedious and takes quite a lot of time. So we kind of sat in a room and problem solved on how we can mitigate this issue. And our lead machine learning engineer at Retro Rabbit, she's also on this project. So she said, you know, what we can do is when we send out surveys, instead of having to manually go through it, we can use unsupervised learning in order to sort through that, and she can give me, so she can do that and she can give me the insights from that. So creating those different groups or patterns of shared behavior, and I can use that as a basis for the personas, which is what we did. And we were able to create this level of detailed personas in basically only 2 weeks. So what we did was we sent out surveys. We got the data from the surveys. She sorted them with unsupervised learning to point out the patterns. And from that, I was able to kind of get a baseline of the different user types. And then I did interviews, so that's more of the qualitative research so that we know kind of why we're seeing these patterns and things. So I did the interviews, and then that was also added onto the persona. So something that would have taken months, or not months, but quite a while just to sort through that, especially the survey data, it took us about 2 weeks to do this. And then I've been involved in kind of 2 app audits, which is kind of what we call it. And we're using information architecture. So both on the startup and the current project I'm on now, what you'll see is as time goes on, stuff is always just added and added and added to an app or a website. And there's also usually different design teams doing that. And there's not always time to align on everything. So we get to a point where we feel like we need to audit the app in order to find inconsistencies in the flows and finding unnecessary duplication. And what we use is information architecture. So instead of using an information architecture before doing the project or actually designing the app or whatever, which is what you should be doing, but there's no time for that. We usually use the information architectures in order to kind of map out what we already have and finding any inconsistencies and unnecessary duplication. So that's basically a way of adapting that tool in just a slightly different context. So just to wrap up, UX and human-centered design in industry, it is quite complicated because there are many external factors and politics, that's what we kind of call it, that influences your UX practice, your processes and your methodologies. And you will need to adapt the tools and processes that you know to fit your context. And there will never be a one-size-fits-all process that will fit for all of the context or problems. And you, as a UX designer, you're going to have to speak up. You're going to have to educate those who hired you on the real value that proper UX can bring. And you're going to have to convince others to do your job right. So lastly, so I'll get to questions just after this, but lastly, I just want to kind of advertise the Retro Rabbit grad program. So I'm not going to read through all of this. I'm going to share this with you guys and you can go through it. But basically, Retro Rabbit has a really, really cool grad program that they run every year. It's for designers and for developers. And the main aim is just to get you industry ready really fast. So it's basically just bridging the gap between university and industry. And this is by no means just a course or whatever. If you get accepted into the program, you are hired full-time as a developer or a designer, as a grad. And then you're a grad for the first 3 or 4 months. And then afterwards, you are actually appointed as a junior. So this is actually a full-time position. We're not going to kick you, or you're not going to be kicked out after the grad program and now you have to fend for yourself. And basically it entails workshops by industry experts. So so Retro's employees come and do workshops with you guys, and you work on real projects for real clients. So there's always a grad project, and it is usually for real clients, and it's usually projects that it's kind of feel-good project in a sense. Yeah, so it's really an exciting and effective program if anyone is interested. And then just a bit about Retro Rabbit, why you would want to work for us. It's a really, really great company with a really great company culture. It's really not just about work all the time. We really love working hard, but playing even harder. They're also big on continuous learning, which is something that I really love because They're really invested in making sure that you are always growing. So they really encourage postgraduates. They really encourage you doing courses, going to conferences, and they will even pay for it as well. And even with lockdown, with everyone being at home, they also go through a lot of effort to make sure we have things to do together as a company, so that we don't burn out. We still feel a sense of community, because what we do can get quite hard. But yeah, it's kind of a really great community. And that's me. Thank you so much for listening. Is there any questions?
Thanks, Chantal. That was really, really interesting. It's good to hear about the bridge between industry and studying. You know, like as far as we can try to emulate the industry, you know, while the students are studying, it does. There's just so many factors and wild cards when you're working with real clients that it's you know, it's good to know, just to kind of like get a little bit of a frame for that. So like Chantal said, are there any questions, guys? You can put on your mic and ask now. Nobody.
Cool.
That's very very quiet. Guys, are there no questions, no interesting? I mean, you've got a student here from that went through the same course as you. Is there nothing that you were wondering about, like you know, considering that she shares a lot of the same background as you? Surely there must be something that you want to ask.
I have a question.
Yes.
Chantal, did you enroll in the graduate program at Retro Rabbit before you started there?
So when I started at Retro, I was kind of late for the graduate program. So I first interned at Retro Rabbit for a year. It's kind of where I did my hours and stuff. And by that time, the grad program was really young. I think it was the first time they were running it. And then I was a bit late for applying for that. So I didn't go through the grad program,
right.
But I was involved with this year's grad program a lot. I gave a lot of the workshops and the talks, and kind of more of a mentor role in this. So I have experienced it from that perspective, and it is a really, really, really good program.
Okay. And then am I right in saying that you did your honors at Open Window?
Yes.
Do you feel like it made a difference maybe to your work that you're doing there, or I mean, how has it influenced any of that?
No, definitely. So also just want to, touching on that, studying what you did at Open Window, it really gives you the best entry into industry. I've been also involved in a lot of the interviews of like appointing designers, and people who went to Open Window really have a broad knowledge of human-centered design and industry, and what the difference is between UX and UI and all of that. So you guys kind of have the best like foundation for going into industry. And then also with the honors program, I really, really learned a lot about myself as well, and UX as an industry. I was able to do a lot of research on all of these questions that I had on, you know, how can I be human-centered in industry? How can I apply UX in industry? Because I had a lot of that questions before doing honors, and I kind of focused my honors topic on exactly that, on how we can adapt, how we can be better working in industry, because currently it is really hard working in a space where we're not that human-centered and our users are not really at the center of what we do. So honors really helped me to figure that out.
All right.
Leanne also asked whether you completed your honors part-time, or did you do it in 1 year?
I did it full-time in 1 year.
Okay,
Yeah.
and how was the workload? How did you find the work-life balance while doing your honors?
There were a few things in my personal life I had to give up, but it's just for a year, and it was worth it. It was hard because working full-time and then studying full-time, it means going into the office earlier to kind of get some honest work done for an hour before you have to start working, and also when you get home from work, working on that, and also working weekends. But for me, it was really worth it, and it's only a year, and it is doable.
Yeah, I must say that sounds very reminiscent of doing my master's as well while working full time. It's definitely the case. Working weekends, working nights, you have to just fit everything into these slots in your life. That makes a lot of sense. That's cool. Anything else that you guys want to find out while we're still on the line? We already work weekends, says Josh. I know, Josh. Don't worry about that. That's just one of those things. That's what your final year is like. Chantal, do you have any last words of wisdom for the students to just motivate them through the last little bit of their studies here? Because, you know, given that 2020 is so tough on everybody's.
Yeah, all I can say is just keep on keeping on, work hard. Really, it's the last stretch. Put everything you have into it. It's really, really going to be worth it at the end. And this is really a great industry to be working in. It's constantly changing. It's constantly developing, and because, especially for UX, because it's so new, you really have an opportunity to really shape the way that UX will work in the future in South Africa. And I think that's a really exciting thing. I think everyone's futures are going to be very, very exciting.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting to, you know, we've been working with this for years now, and we've been we've been working on the courses, and the students have been working on it for years. So, you know, UX to us feels a bit like old hat because that's kind of all we hear about the whole time. But it is good to know that, like, in industry or in the world out there, it still is something that needs to kind of be brought into the workplaces and stuff, which does make our perspective that we're cultivating here very important. So it's good to know that that's still the case, and that we're not outdating ourselves for no reason.
Exactly.
All right. But Chantal, thank you so much for taking the time to come and speak to the students, and thank you for sharing your wisdom and your experiences with us. It was very, very interesting to listen to, and it's good to know that that the students have a good foundation going into industry, and that there's people like you out there that will take them under your wing. So good stuff. Guys, thank you very much for joining, and Chantal, thank you very much for presenting. Please send your presentation to us so that I can send it on to the students, and I'll share this video with you as soon as I receive it. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a fantastic week. I appreciate all your time and effort. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks.
Bye.